Parks Department for improvements to Bay Village Neighborhood Park. And I'd like to start by thanking you all for participating. We know that your time is valuable and appreciate your sharing it with us. I also wanted to thank the community supporters who started this whole process by applying for Edward Ingersoll Brown grant funding. And that got us the initial pot of money to start the design process. Since then, the Parks Department has made an additional ask as part of the capital budget. We've gone through the preliminary approvals process, and I think we expect the City Council to vote on the budget in June at some point. But it was that initial group that really made this all possible. And then Parks is very pleased to contribute more to it. So if you want, you can contact your city councilor or councilors and encourage them to support the additional funding. The purpose of the meeting tonight is really for us to listen, to hear what the community's priorities are and what you all see as challenges and opportunities. I have with me Christine Brandeo, who's our community outreach coordinator, and she's running the Zoom meeting. I also have 2 members of our design team from Copley Wolf Design Group, Aaron Kramer and Jim Haru, and we're grateful for their participation as well. What we can bring to the process is an understanding of what's worked in other parks and our own professional expertise, but we really rely on the community to tell us, what actually happens on the ground in this park and what's sacred and what would be good to change. So we're really looking forward to this process. So let's go to the next slide. So how you can use this is, you've all been let in, so you joined either via web or via phone, and we'll go through our perceptions of the existing conditions in the park, and then at the end have a question and answer session. So during the question and answer session at the end, you can raise your hand. And then throughout the presentation, you can click on the Q&A and type in your question, and then we'll address those at the end. So let's go ahead. So I'm going to introduce our project team and give you an overview of the project. And then Aaron and Jim are going to do the presentation of what's existing on the in the park right now. And then we'll have a discussion session at the end, and finally closing remarks and next steps. So next, please. So as I said, I'm Annie Blair. I'm welcome. You're getting in touch with me with questions or observations whenever you like. Christine from Community Outreach. Jim Haru is the principal in charge of the project for Copley Wolf, and Aaron is supporting the effort. And both Jim and Aaron will talk about the existing conditions. So next. And at this point, this is what our schedule is looking like. We typically have 3 community meetings, of which this is the first. And as I said, the first meeting is really about listening to you all. We'd like to hold the second meeting in early June and show you several alternatives for solutions, and then let people disappear for the summertime and convene again for early to mid-September, at which time we would show the preferred design. And that may be a combination of some of the features of the alternatives that we're going to show in June. Then we'll go out to bid in the wintertime. So the bid documents will be prepared from fall of 2021 through probably January of 2022. And then hopefully construction would start in the spring of 2022, run through the construction season, and we would hope to reopen the park during September of 2022. And unfortunately, the park will need to be closed during construction, completely closed off, because it's not safe to have public access to the park. And the expression is that the contractor owns the park while it's under construction. So that can be a hardship, but also, our goal is to make it absolutely worth it in the end. So next. So what we'll be talking about throughout this process, in order to develop and refine the park design, is we need to meet the city's overall priorities, and we'll run through those briefly. We need to comply with safety guidelines and regulatory guidelines. The Parks and Recreation Department has its own set of goals that support the city's priorities. And then your community input is a very important part of this. So next, please. So the city's overall priorities are accessibility and inclusivity, expanding walking access to parks, equity, health, and having the parks be a place for community building. Next. And then the Parks Department goals are to make the parks accessible and available to all. And accessibility is going to be an issue here because we're pretty sure there are places where the Americans with Disabilities Act aren't being met. Restore and redevelop the water feature into a fully functional fountain. Introduce permanent seating into the park. Use adaptive and resilient landscapes to support maintenance, reasonable maintenance, and to promote connections. So we got some of these from the Brown Fund application. And they are to retouch and repair the current iron boundary fence. As I just said, restoring and redeveloping the water feature. Introducing permanent seating, repair or replace the black irrigation box, and introduce electricity into the park for special events and performances. There are the gas lamps now, but I understand that there's been an extension cord run out from the Chinese church in order to accommodate some of those other special events. Next, please. And Erin, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Actually, Jim, would you like to go first? Oh, you're on mute, Jim.
And, there you go. Just so you know, I've been a South End resident for 36 years. So just nearby, my daughter actually went to school on Church Street before they moved into the old Lincoln School. So I've had friends who lived in Bay Village, very, very familiar with the neighborhood and just the area in general and some of the dynamics. So I introduced Aaron to the park a few weeks ago, and we walked around and took a look at some of the issues that Annie just mentioned, as well as went through a lot of the letters of support that people had written to the Brown Fund, asking for certain things, which some of which were highlighted in that list that Annie just went through. So as she mentioned, we're really here to listen. And when Aaron and I walked around, we had observations. Everyone has opinions, and but we're not here to talk about design issues. We're here to listen to you saying, we hope you look at this. And then we'll come back and take all those comments as well as the letters and information in the letters and synthesize everything, and then show you a few different options in early June, as Annie mentioned. And people will have that in their hands to go off and do their summer thing and think about it themselves. And in September, we can really get together and really have it come together quickly, hopefully, and then move into the next phases, which have a functioning and better park by the end of 2022. So, so I'm going to let Aaron go through some of the analysis issues that he and I witnessed out there. And we understand that the park has historically had a very great support group. People clearly are good gardeners. There's great plants out there. There's a love for the park with and the plaques and that kind of thing that's out there. Just seeing the items that are left around the park, the hoses, the benches, etc. So the park clearly is used and clearly is needed too, as my village is a pretty tight area. So this is a great resources, and we hope we can make it better for you. So let's kick it off, Aaron. Go to the some of the observations.
Okay. And this first slide is just kind of showing where the park is in Bay Village and where Bay Village is, in case you are listening from other parts of the city of Boston and you need a little bit of help orienting yourself. So we're just south of the Common, just south of downtown, and then really at the corner, kind of on Charles Street South, across from another community. So it's at the edge of Bay Village, kind of near Chinatown. So that is where the park is. And so when you get to the site, this is some of the stuff that we observed. So this is just kind of a...
Aaron, can you just step back for a second to the other one? We do understand, Aaron's right. This is just in case people don't know where Bay Village is, but we're assuming most of you do. But Bay Village has always had that unique position of being its own little island in a way. And we recognize that as well. And the fact that the park is at the edge of that island. So the yellow actually, it highlights the drivable streets that are within the park, at least driveways as well. And the sort of the light blue lines represent usually kind of during non-pandemic times can be very busy, and that includes the South Charles on Charles Street South, which goes by the park. So we want you to keep that in mind too, and as I'm sure you have it in mind when you use the park. Hit it, Aaron.
So here's just an overview plan with a few images. Main things. So here's Charles Street South at the south side of the site, as was shown in the previous map. Site on the north side is Melrose Street as you head towards the Common. Like if you're facing towards the Common, Melrose would be to the north, and the south end of the site is bounded by Fayette Street. The site is basically has a boundary of very lush plantings. As you can see down in this lower right-hand image, there are lots of great plantings in the park. There's a bit of two entrances, the Charles Street entrance, which is a couple of steps down right here, and then the Melrose Street entrance, which is just a concrete landing with a gate. There are 3 planters that are raised planters to help kind of show the edge of the park, and 3 existing trees that are in good condition, as well as 8 gas lamps. So in these pictures kind of just show some of that. And if on the next slide, you will see we have some more site inventory images. The fountain does run as per the Brown Fund. It does work, but it currently does not recycle water. So this is city water that is draining out to this storm sewer system. And also the fountain happened to be turned on when we were there. and it is currently actually overshooting its little catch basin and onto the brick paving. There's also a grade change if towards the north of the park along Charles Street South at the fence. So the street is about a foot above the park at this area, which is why there's the 2 steps at Charles Street. It is much more flush at Melrose and Fayette Street. There are 3 existing raised planters around the park, and we did notice one of the things we observed is they're definitely in need of some repointing and repair. If people would like those rehab, that is something that we would do. There's also some lush plantings, especially, and here's just another view showing them adjacent to the Chinese church, which forms the back of the park. Here's some more site images. One of the big things we noticed is all the lush plantings. There are tools that are in the park that people use to help maintain the plantings. Here's the mechanical fountain box on this right-hand side. That was the image that in the Brown Fund was talked about needing of repair. There's no garbage. There are no permanent garbage cans in the park, but at the corner of South Charles and Fayette, there are some outside of the park. Here's just some other site conditions showing again the Melrose Street entrance and how it goes. You can look up Broadway and just some more of the lush plantings, and then the walkway between the Chinese church and the park where there's an existing fence. And really the raised condition, this picture here highlights the raised condition. This is the corner of Melrose and South Charles, and showing just how the park is really a couple of feet lower than the street grade. So with all that stuff in mind, this plan kind of is some of our observations and analysis. The 3 planters, they're kind of at the corners of the park. They're in some need of repair. There are the 8 gas lamps, which are in good condition, scattered throughout the park. So they provide ample illumination, but they do not allow you to provide electrical hookup. The park right now, as it is, the brick paving, the mortar is in need of some repointing, but the paving currently slopes to this. There's one catch basin in the middle of the park, and it slopes at a pretty good pitch to this area. There's the current Charles Street South. When we're talking about accessibility, the stairs are not accessible. There's not, if you have limited mobility, if you have kids in a stroller, it's kind of hard to navigate those stairs, and you would have to use as it's currently set up, the Melrose Street entrance. So really, if you are carrying somebody, if you're in a wheelchair, there's really only currently one way into the park. 3 existing trees in good condition. There's lots of dense planting, and the fountain equipment is here. There could be a potential to bring electricity into the park there. Depending on what is in there, there might already be electricity, and in the existing fountain. And Jim, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I just we just like to again acknowledge that we understand that this is at the edge of the community. So across the street there's also a recently renovated park as well, and but that's the South Charles community versus the Bay Village community. So we'd like to hear your opinions about how do we make this feel like it's pulled into Bay Village even more so, or even if that's an issue. And I think Aaron did a great job highlighting the effective inaccessibility of the park. I mean, with stairs being on Charles Street South, and a pitch which would not meet ADA standards within the park for a plaza. And for a plaza, they do have certain limitations which this park would not meet. So those are the types of things we would look at in terms of like at least getting it to be more accessible to all and have a greater level of equity. And one thing he mentioned sort of in peripheral is that the inventory of tools and hoses and stuff like that, which currently is just stacked up against the stair area. And if that's ever been thought of, is a storage facility for that kind of materials useful. We just recently redid the fountain over at Ringgold Park over the past several years. And although we did not put the storage box in here, they actually have a storage box for rakes and spades and hoses and all that kind of stuff to help the neighbors not have to, fish it out of a closet or a basement, because we understand that everyone has limited space.
And then, so that was kind of our initial assessment and kind of oriented people with the park and diagraphing. And now really the main part of this presentation is we would like to hear what you would like to see at the park. How can we make the park better connected to the Bay Village community? Is there a part of the park that is your favorite part of the park that you definitely would like to see enhanced or maintained? And what groups use the park? And also importantly, is there any other park that you think of, maybe not necessarily in Bay Village, where that has elements that you really like and you would like to see in this park when we go about rehabilitating it?
Excellent. What Aaron means by that is that there's great pocket parks. I mentioned Ringgold Park. There's a great little pocket park on Bradford Street, Hayes Park, which is not too far from where Annie lives, and each one has an involved community group that helps take care of the park, and each one has something that's slightly different. So knowing that everyone knows parks, if there's something in there that's a favorite and you can always wished you had, just like to hear about that as well.
Also, excuse me, I think we'd like confirmation. We've been thinking about this not as a wholesale redesign, but as a renovation of what's there. So I think that we could use some insights about the degree of change that people want to see.
Okay, we have one person's hands up.
So this is John Shope. I think I've been unmuted. Can I be heard?
Yes, yes, you can.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. So just by way of introduction, as I said, my name is John Shope, S-H-O-P-E. I live at 56 Fayette Street in Bay Village, so not too far from the park. I've lived there for over 20 years now. Back in the early 2000s, I was president of the Bay Village Neighborhood Association for a couple of years, and also I was a founding member of the Friends of Bay Village Parks and Elliott Norton Park, which for a long time was supporting this park. It's since been folded into BVNA. And I had the privilege of representing Bay Village when Mayor Menino opened up the Bay Village Park when it was first created. So I have a lot of interest and I walk by every day. So a couple of things. Let me first answer the question that was just raised, which is sort of a renovation or a total redo. At least I haven't spoken about this with others. I would be more inclined towards a renovation, but I'm certainly open to other thoughts, or maybe there's some sort of a mix between total renovation, or between renovation and total redo. But I do want to convey the following important concerns that might not be obvious to folks in the Parks Department. So as was noted earlier, we are right downtown, and there are some implications of that for the park. So we're not very far from the Boston Common and the Boston Public Garden. Periodically, there will be a demand on the part of the larger public to clean the drug addicts and the homeless out of the Common and the Public Garden. When that happens, oftentimes they seek to come into Bay Village. So we have to be cognizant that their occupancy doesn't essentially prevent the use of the park by children and other residents. So in a way, their use can destroy the access by others. I certainly, don't want to have my kids picking up used needles and so on. I think that the design of the park, certainly with regard to seating, has to be such that it prevents, or at least discourages, I guess there's no way of totally preventing, but discouraging, sleeping on the benches, using it as a place to, sleep off a drug injection, that sort of thing. We have had some success with the park that's right next to the fire station at the corner of Isabella Street and Columbus Avenue with regard to the seating there. That's been an enormously successful little park with seating and flowers, and it doesn't seem to get too much illicit use. So just a thought to look at the kind of seating that's been used there. Another point that I would raise, again related to the fact that we're downtown, is that we're very near the nightclubs on Warrenton Street and then also on Tremont Street. And there have also been various proposals to put in establishments that would sell cannabis. And so, and that's all fine, but the problem is that it does mean that there's the potential for abuse of the park late at night. And so I certainly would want to make sure that while I totally support the idea of handicap access, we need to make sure that we have the ability to lock the park, lock it at night. Because again, if we don't, essentially it's going to become unusable by anybody because of the debris that would be left over from those late night illicit uses. And then a third point, again, I'll sound like I'm very focused on crime when the subject is this very positive park, but I think the truth is, if we want it to be a great park, we have to think about these things. Is making sure that there aren't sort of hidden spaces. In other words, you want to make sure that a police officer who's going down Charles Street South will be able to, from a cruiser, be able to look into the park and see what's going on in there, and making sure that any illicit uses are going to be prevented. And then the last comment that I would make is that there's sort of the time that's in the park, and it's wonderful to see kids in the neighborhood going into the park. It's wonderful to see birthday parties in the park. I've even seen wedding photos being taken in the park, and that's wonderful. But I want just to make sure everybody's aware that some of the enjoyment of the park is really just as kind of a view park. In other words, we walk by and we see all of the wonderful flowers that have been planted and maintained by a number of Bay Villagers who are remarkably dedicated. And I just want to make sure that nobody in the Parks Department thinks of that as somehow dead space or not sufficiently used space or anything like that. There's really a great amount of pleasure, at least to me, and I think to others, from having those flower beds, being tended, even if it means that there's not necessarily as much room, within the space to, I don't know, run around or play ball or whatever. And in that regard, I would say the contrast, getting back to the issue about sort of the fact that we have the neighboring parks, I think the contrast with Elliott Norton Park with its large green lawn is actually a nice one. That's a great space if you want to, sort of have more kind of run around type activity. Obviously, there's a kids' playground there. Having the Bay Village Park as being more of a kind of a floral space and a view space, and obviously a little bit of a sit down space. I think that's positive. So anyway, I've been going on for a long time. If anybody has any questions about what I've said, I'm certainly happy to respond.
So John, it sounds like you're almost talking about this park more as a garden than as a park with a lot of programming.
So I think that's right. And the reason for that is that that we have, frankly, a bunch of other spaces that are nearby. And I'll just say, for instance, from the perspective of activity within the Bay Village community, people tend to have more sort of gatherings at the little park that's at the intersection of Church and Melrose Streets, just because that's sort of more central to Bay Village. So for instance, this coming weekend, we're going to have the neighborhood cleanup. The meeting will be at Church and Melrose, and that's where the city will be handing out brooms and shovels and all that stuff. So those tend to be, you know, when there's the Christmas sing-along, that's again, meet at the park at Church and Melrose. So I'm certainly not opposed to having you know, people gather in the Bay Village Park, you know, during the day for legitimate activity and so on. But it has tended to be, you know, sort of, you know, couples, small groups, sometimes a little birthday party. It tends not to be, if there's anything that's involving a lot of people, that tends to be one of the other larger parks that are just, you know, a stone's throw away.
Those are all great comments, John. And it's interesting that over the past several weeks, Aaron and I have talked a lot about some of your points, particularly safety, intuitive safety. Yeah, how do you feel when you're in the park, having eyes on the park, and not just by the police, but like Church Street, we talked about how, you know, that park, it's surrounded by eyes on the park versus the Bay Village Park, which doesn't have so many eyes in the park. It's so those are things we do have, and we have kept in mind and we'll have in terms of our consideration in terms of any kind of proposal we put forth. Also, being someone who lives in the city for so long too, these are issues that I was chair of the Ringgold Park Design Committee when that was first being renovated 24 years ago or so. So, and these are very familiar points. And I love, Annie, your comment. You know, thinking of this as more as a garden. It is in a way. It's because there isn't a playground in there, and it's too small for too much activity other than gathering. Yet simultaneously, the energy that goes into the gardening there is clear. And it's nice that it's a resource. So so these are all the things that we've actually observed, and hadn't thought about you know, when they you know, when they push the balloon from one end, it kind of blows up the other end. So when they're pushing indigents and such out from one spot, you know, where do they go? And we see that in my neighborhood too, in the Shawmut Avenue area. So so yeah, the selection of benches, you know, what is it? You know, yeah, those are things that we keep in mind, and we're doing several other parks as well. So these are common denominators that we will certainly keep in mind as well. So and I love the fact that you could describe some of the activities in the park, and we'd like to hear more about that. You know, birthday parties or wedding photos or that kind of thing. And Annie mentioned that someone in the past has mentioned perhaps having music out here on occasion. So, so anyone else who wants to suggest types of activities you like, that gives us clue in terms of how it's best functioning in terms of circulation. And we were also, by the way, thinking of this park as being a renovation and not as a gut rehab.
Thank you, John. I'm gonna unmute someone else. Afia,
Hi, how are you?
good, how are you?
Hi, my name's Aoife. I know that spelling is confusing.
Sorry.
No, please don't worry at all. I'm here with Tom, who actually waters the garden and does a lot of those nice plantings and tends to the garden every day for many, many, many years. But one of the things I wanted to bring, I'm very relieved and happy to hear that it's more of a renovation than a rehab, because I think it's a great park the way it is, but we're looking at the time when we put the grant in for a renovation. And we like many aspects of the park, but any improvements to the functionality would obviously be welcomed. I did have another chat with another neighbor. I don't know if she was on the meeting or not today, but she had brought up an idea that might be nice for the winter, because it is such a viewing garden, is to do some plantings of interest that bring out the winter aspects. And add a little bit of dimension and shape to the garden that way. We're very happy to hear the electrics, if there is a possibility to get electricity, because during the holiday season, they do put a Christmas tree in there, and that's like a holiday tree, and it is very, very pretty. And that's the kind of thing. We also have a music group. I cannot offhand just now remember the name of the nice man, but it's a local group of children who want to practice their music in the park. And we were hoping to let them start doing that quite soon, but that's a going forward idea, that small groups of people to practice that way would be wonderful. So that was just two or three things that I wanted to mention in case they haven't shown up on your lists. But it does seem you've paid a lot of attention to our proposal and covered a lot of what we had asked and we're interested in. So it sounds like we've got a lot more in common, which is great. We really appreciate that.
And have you have any contact with the Community Music Center in the South End?
I can't remember the person's name offhand because my email is broken, but I can get that to you. And
oh no, I can actually ask myself too, but I'm just saying that's you mentioned that you'd like to see other groups do that sort of thing, and you're a great resource for your community group to reach out to if you haven't already.
Because as John Shope mentioned, a lot of people just enjoy the park when they're walking by.
Mm-hmm.
And
I have.
They're beautiful. It's a nice, people often just reroute their walk home so they can take in the park and see what's growing and see who's there. And it's pretty all seasons. So it would be nice to have a little music or, some sort of entertainment, but to be able to extend the evening slightly. We're not looking to, have a, raucous party every Friday or something, but,
When that cannabis center is open, there you go.
we can all get our edibles, carry on.
Well, yeah, since Tom is the water
Is here with me.
planter tender, so
and Tom also, he really is vigilant about picking up all the garbage and keeping, and that's a great issue that he really keeps the streets clean around the neighborhood and constantly, I think helped get those little bins on the outside, so he manages those. Not much goes without Tom noticing it.
well, the winter effect is something that I appreciate.
That makes a huge difference because
Absolutely,
eyes on the village, and that's what's happening. Tom is there, and it's terrific. And we'd like to get any renovations that we can, and a quick project, obviously, as best we can.
Thank you.
So, well, thank you. Very nice to see the presentation so far. We appreciate it.
Then I'm going to chime back in. We have a couple of question and answers that I'd like to just read out loud. Laura Shea says, the raised planters have a nest of rats in them. Laura, good to know. We will make note of that. She also says that families and with children use the park, which that is good to know. It's very useful for us to know who uses the park, as Jim and everybody's been saying. It's good to know as we figure out what kind of seating and electricity and other amenities we need. It's good to know. Joe Carrata asked if it would be great to have a child-friendly fountain. How could a larger fountain be accommodated? Would it need to be recirculating? Does not, Annie, I can let you answer about recirculation, but we can definitely look at getting in a larger fountain. How much larger is up for discussion?
Sure. So there are a couple of issues here. One is, as I understand it, it's on a timer right now, and during the time that it's operating, the water is not recirculated and it just flows down the drain. One thing we've been talking about within the department is we would much rather not have that much water go down the drain, even though it's not a big fountain with a lot of flow. But we might make it more child friendly and also more efficient and sustainable if we have a user operated function like the push buttons that you see in splash pads or spray pools. And I know the kids love that because there's a cause and effect. So they push the button, the water comes on for a certain amount of time. And then it goes off on its own and another kid can come push it again.
Yeah, Annie, and for you neighbors, very short walk from Bay Village. If you know where Bradford Street is, just behind Formaggio, South End Formaggio's on Shaman Avenue. That's where Bradford Street just runs behind that row of buildings. There's one of those user operated fountains there, and it is a child's delight, adult's delight too. So you push the button and it runs for 30 or 40 seconds or so, and then it goes down. But there's a surprise in it too. So when the water's turned down in the park, I recommend you go over there and push the button and see what I'm talking about. So it's fun. And it's very attractive.
Couple more comments came in. John Shope says that IFA is referring to apparently a different organization than the Community Music Center. I'll probably butcher this last name. I'm sorry. Kel Kulakerstan, who lives in Bay Village, is the guy who leads the other programs. John Cerrone also says that tables and chairs would be great. And then Marie Nolan says that Charles Street South tends to be pretty busy with vehicles going fairly fast. So factoring that into planning, particularly in entrance design, is important. That is good to know. And as one of the things that we observed when we were on the site is that is definitely the busier end and the less quiet end. And also when we're talking about accessibility, right, there's an area where you would have more grade change, which makes an accessible entrance a little bit harder to accommodate there.
Keith, you can unmute yourself.
I did. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Keith. I live at 17 Melrose Street. I just wanted to raise a few points. One is I'm not sure if there's enough resources to put in a watering system, if that's an option. Also with the trash, I'm not sure if you were thinking about putting trash in the park. My concern is that would sort of lead to more litter in the park, and who's responsible for emptying the trash and stuff. I think when it's outside the park, it kind of keeps the trash out there. So I think that's something to be consider that issue. Also, if they put in, benches in there, it'd be good if they can have the benches so you're not sitting all facing each other, like a theater in the round thing. So if they can somehow, if they're facing different directions so that you're sitting there and you kind of have some privacy. Not sure how many benches will be there, but just something to consider. And also just curious, if it's a renovation, what will be done, if anything, to sort of to protect the existing plantings that are more mature, things that would sort of winter over some of the trees, and if they'll be protected during the process. And that's it for me.
Thank you.
Keith, just so you know, it's we don't do these things in a vacuum. So in regards to any sacred trees that are not obvious, that if they can't be protected, could they be relocated, that kind of thing. But the mature trees that are out there, I think they're cork trees, are unique. They look healthy. They would be protected at all costs. So and things obviously like perennials and ground covers and all that type of stuff, which is probably a lot of Tom's handiwork. Those are the types of things that even before a shovel gets put in the ground, a process would occur to see could be relocated, moved somewhere temporarily, and put back, or just protected in place, depending on what the construction task will be.
I think also as far as site furnishings go, it used to be your choice was a bench either with a center handrail or without a center handrail. And there's a much wider variety of site furniture available, including individual seats with arms so that someone who needs some assistance getting up can push themselves out of the chair. Cafe tables, the red cafe table that's out there now really I think it adds a lot, as does the umbrella. There are occasional tables that can be placed with individual seats that are helpful also. So we have a lot more variety to work with than we did, 20 years ago.
Susan, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm Susan Buda, and I am a Bay Village resident and for 25 years and loving the place forever. There's a couple of things you asked about how the park is used, and I would like to just share some of those observations. I see it mostly for people either walking through and looking at the garden. One of the most delightful things about this garden is that there's such a variety of plants there that there's something always blooming and always color. And I would love to see that preserved because it is quite beautiful to see a season of color. One of the things that I have personally found lacking, and I can see other people have too, is it's difficult to have a conversation in the park. The seating that we've had previously, and it's what we were able to do, was not real conducive for people like to have a conversation because the benches were too small or too far apart. Just having a couple people having a nice conversation, it's really conducive to that. And that's not like a large group. Well, it might even be good if you had some occasional tables and stuff to have, occasionally, maybe a committee could meet there, a book club or whatever. But mostly just having, I see people like a couple people having conversations. Another thing that I noticed is having seating by the fountain may be nice. I actually saw an elderly man bring out a folding chair so he could sit near the fountain. So that might be kind of delightful to have a place where you can mostly hear the water versus city, sounds. What else? Is there anything else? Oh, I'm glad to hear. It sounds like you will keep the more mature trees. One of the things in this park is there's not a lot of shade. So it's hard to use in high summer with a lot of sun. So if we can keep shade or think about just not a total shade. I love the flowers need that beautiful sun, but just having like a little place for some shade in the midday. Okay, I think that's all I need. I was going to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron, you want to answer the Q&A?
Sure. Carol Carlson in the Q&A session says, during the summer months, it is hard to keep the garden from drying out daily. It would be great to get an efficient soaker hose. And so I think this is the second conversation we've had now. That would be something we would talk about with Boston Parks if we'd want to do, since we already have a water box, irrigation or some other way for maintaining the lush plantings in the park.
Hello again. Hi, it's Aoife. One of the things I was thinking would be nice if we could incorporate in the design seating that might also be built into the corners that is on the outside a little bit. Because I find sometimes that there's a lot of children or other people gathered already on the inside, people still like to sit and have a chat outside. So they often hang around the corners and do their chatting there. But if there was a built-in seating, I thought that might be a nice feature.
Yeah, I mentioned going around your neighborhood and nearby to look at what works well and you like in other parks. And I always recommend that. Like again, I mentioned we redid the, I was in the park committee for Ringgold Park when it was first redone, but what we were the landscape architects that actually installed the fountain in the middle of the park. And that actually has a nice blend of planting, permanent seating,
Yeah.
and in the form of a wall and a operable fountain that's operable by the user. So those types of things, you know, I always think it's good for people to know what's around and see if that works for them too.
Yeah. I was very impressed with the Ringgold Park. The night I walked by to see it, it was just, every corner of it was being used. It was a fantastic gathering of neighbors and children and every different groups of people all at once. And
Mhm.
it was really, you know, during COVID, it was seriously one of the happiest places in the neighborhood. It was remarkable. So the functionality was great on that.
Good.
So I really liked it. But that was just my point, is to incorporate seating on the outside too, if that were built in. It could work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else have anything they would like to share? I don't think we have anyone right now, guys.
Well, let's go to the next slide, which I think is maybe the last one. And I just want to thank everybody for giving us their thoughtful insights and their time. And I'm encouraged by the amount of participation. You know, there's times when nobody shows up, but it's clear that there's a lot of affection and enthusiasm for this park. And I think that working on it together is really going to be terrific, enjoyable along the way, and with a great result. So thank you.
There's one more slide too.
So,
There you go. So Annie, you can, if you want to explain what people can do with this.
I'm going to let Christine explain it because she knows it a lot better than I do.
Okay.
There are a couple of different moving parts here.
Is this just the,
It's the code you can scan in with your phone, and
it's for
actually-
the
It points to
website? I'm
the
sorry, I didn't
cities.
know you guys, I didn't know if it was for this, a survey, or if it was for the website.
It points to the website, the Boston Parks website, for the redevelopment of the park.
Yeah, if you guys if you want to just point your camera and the QR code, it will pop up the website for the project page, and you can follow the updates. This will also be posted on the project page within a week, and you can share it out with anyone who couldn't attend tonight.
Well, thanks to all of you, and thank you, Jim and Aaron and Christine.
thank you, Annie and Christine. Good job. And when we come back,
Also,
and
I'm sorry, we have another, you guys have a question. You have, I'm sorry, if he is, I don't know if I'm saying it right again, I'm sorry. There's about 15 people from the neighborhood that attended today.
Oh, that's great.
when we come back in June, just with some ideas, again, it's going to be centered on renovation, not I got rehab. When we come back, we'll be showing you a bunch of different options, and it's really sort of a working tool. It's not meant to say, here, we're giving you, this is what you're going to get. It's really meant that you come in and you take a look at things and progress it further with us. So our goal is to make you happy at the end. This is where you live.